All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health, episode number 4, and I am beyond thrilled to welcome my guest here, Spike Cohen. Spike, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, as I told you off air, I really, really appreciate you coming on here, and I think everybody else is going to enjoy it too. So, first question, I guess, who is Spike Cohen, and how did Spike Cohen get to where he is today?
So, nice, easy startup question. No, actually, it is easy. It's just a long answer, so I'm going to give it as short of a version as I can. So I don't want to bore people with details. But hey, everybody, I'm Spike Cohen. I was the Libertarian Party's vice presidential candidate last year. We came in third. Thank you. And before that, I had been a businessman. I started a business back in the end of 1998, beginning of 1999, right before my 17th birthday, and started a web design company, and ended up getting involved with multiple startups over the course of that time as well. I was able to retire 4 years ago, and we'll actually talk about that because that's relative to the fitness stuff. I retired 4 years
Mhm.
ago and made a very dramatic shift in my life away from worrying about making money. I reached a point where that didn't really matter as much anymore, and into making sure that I was actually fulfilling my life. And that led me to the Liberty movement, and I've been active ever since. And I hope people like me because I'm just getting started.
Nice, nice. Well, I was watching your videos and different interviews you've done all day today to kind of mentally prepare myself for this. And I guess one question I've never really heard addressed is you were at one point 100 pounds heavier, I think you said in an
Yes.
interview.
Yep.
I
Yep.
I cannot picture it. And I was 70 pounds heavier at one point, and people don't recognize me from there. So
Yep.
I'm sure everybody knows you from your 2020 race. I don't think
Right.
anybody could picture you 100 pounds heavier. And you also dealt with MS. So, as the latter part of the podcast title is health, kind of give a little bit more detail about that. Because, like I said, in all the interviews I've seen of you, I've never heard you touch on that.
Yeah, I've briefly addressed it in passing, and I'm sure someone at some point asked me a little bit more, but I was interested to do this podcast because talking specifically about the health and wellness aspect of it. I don't think I've ever really delved into it. So I think that's
Mhm.
really cool. So I'm probably actually I probably was only about 80 pounds heavier than I am now. I had gotten down to where I was like 150, which was it was too thin for me, but I was touching 250 for quite a while. I was at the point where had I gained any more weight, I wouldn't have just been like fat. I would have been approaching morbidly obese. I'm sure I was already, BMI well into obese, but like actually obese where people
Mhm.
are like, are you okay? Is everything, it was more like just, oh yeah, that Spike, he's a little bigger. I'm sure if people describe me, they're like, yeah, he's, that heavy guy over there. And it's hard to picture that because pretty much all the photos you find of me are post that. By the time I was doing my podcast in 2018, I had gotten down to 150s, 160s. Now I'm between like 160s and 170s, but it's where I want to be. And I so people don't really see that, and when they'll see a photo of me from that time, they're like, who the hell is that? So it's kind of funny. But yeah, what actually led me on that is kind of the same thing that got me out of worrying about business anymore and getting more involved in what my actual like finding a fulfillment and passion in life. And it was my MS diagnosis. um i had I was just young enough where my weight wasn't truly bothering me yet. I was, hypertension, but kind of in that low level hypertension. My cholesterol was worrying, but I was young enough where they said, you'll need to start working on
Mhm.
that. I'm sure I was probably close to pre-diabetic. There were a couple times that my blood sugar numbers were definitely on the higher end, but never at the point where they were telling me to worry about it. But I'm sure I was touching it, or would have been,
Mhm.
especially if this was now 4 or 5 years ago. I'm sure that would have eventually come as well. And I was just young enough where I could kind of fool myself, like, and I'd always tell myself, well, you're focusing on work now, you can get this weight off later. Also, I did a lot of dancing and I stayed active, so I'm like, well, I can still get around okay. I should be fine. When I was diagnosed with MS, after the right side of my body went numb, and they, that started a roughly 2 year process of them eventually telling me that I had MS. I when I went to the doctor, when I was I'm going to the doctors and they're telling me what my treatment options are. And they're talking about drugs. They're talking about, drug treatments, which I'm on one. It has changed everything. It is one of, if not the biggest part of why I'm stable, why I've been in remission for years now. So I'm not discounting that, but that's all they talked about. And I said, well, okay, great. Yeah, we got to do the drug, the immunomodulating drug and all of that. But this is an immune system thing. My immune system is acting funny. Is there not anything I could be doing differently? And really the only things that I heard from them were, you could lose a few pounds, but I mean, you could use you could use losing a few pounds anyway. When I went and saw a specialist, they mentioned the Mediterranean diet, which is strikingly similar to what I'm on now. But
Mhm.
for the most part, they were like, oh, there's not much different you could do, but you could use to lose weight. Well, it turns out they were wrong about not much else I could do. I'm actually on a very strict dietary regimen and exercise regimen, but they were right. If my brain is having interrupted or reduced or distorted signal to the rest of my body, then having a bunch of weight on me is only going to exacerbate all of that. The paresthesia, the problems with mobility, the problems with range of motion, all of that stuff is only going to be made worse if you're fat too. I mean, those things were already making my strength and
Yeah.
range of motion and overall life well-being worse when my immune system was acting normally. So clearly that was a good thing to do. And for a long time, I didn't really take it seriously because I felt like I was okay. My doctors were saying, yeah, this is something you'll definitely need to start worrying about later. And I'm married to like the most gorgeous woman ever. So I wasn't even worried about, and she loves me. So I wasn't
Yeah.
even all that worried about impressing girls, right? Like I had no
Mhm.
real, I wanted to lose the weight, but there was nothing really pushing me. The MS pushed me.
Right. So you were kind of complacent, and I don't mean that in a
Yes.
derogatory way,
No, no,
but
no. I was very complacent. Yes.
yeah, you get comfortable, and I was at that point, one point as well. And you oftentimes do hear of people getting prescribed medications and say, oh, well, you could maybe do this, do that, lose a few pounds, you might get a little bit better. But I don't think anybody realizes how much, just maybe going for walks. I talked about this on a
Yeah.
video I published about a week or so ago, and Stan Efferding, who's the world's strongest bodybuilder, had talked about this a lot with his clients, that 10-minute walks after meals are actually twice as effective for lowering blood sugar and glucose than metformin, which you never hear your doctors tell you about
Really?
that. Yep. So,
Wow.
and it's great for so many different things. So, post meal, it helps with digestion because you're going to help move blood all throughout your
Move some blood.
body.
Yeah.
Right, right. So, but you never hear that. They just say, oh, well, we'll put you on metformin, we'll give you a statin, eat less, move more. Well, my problem with the whole eat less, move more thing is that you could tell people that and you can shout caloric deficit in their face, but they don't understand what that looks like. They don't understand
Right.
what a healthier diet looks like or what changing your lifestyle to be healthier looks like. And it sounds like you figured that
Exactly.
out pretty well.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, man. Kyle, part of the problem is that a lot of these doctors, I spoke with a doctor once and I said, how much do you learn about nutrition? And they said, we get a few hours here and there in
Yep.
training and we'll get updates. Some of the pharmaceutical companies, oddly enough, it's the pharmaceutical companies. We'll give them some like addition. They'll do like an additional free ongoing continuing education training about nutrition, so they have a basic understanding and they can combine that with their overall medical knowledge of the body and how it works. So they
Mhm.
have some understanding, and I would imagine the average doctor probably has at least a little bit more understanding of nutrition than just the average person, average layperson does, but they're not experts in it, but
Mhm.
they should be. Especially like a GP or something like that, they should be. My GP actually is. I actually chose her based on the fact that she was much more holistic in the way
Mhm.
that she looks at things, and that's been incredibly helpful because if your body is the sum of everything you're consuming, not just the
Mhm.
food you're consuming, but the sunlight or lack thereof that
Yes.
you're consuming, the toxins you're consuming, the interpersonal relationships you're consuming, the media you're consuming,
Mhm.
everything that is going into your body and coming out of your body it results in what your overall health is. Not addressing all of those things and instead focusing on pills, obviously it's easier. it's insurance approved because it's something they can point at and say, yes, this is something
Hmm.
we will approve the payment for. And I mean, we could have an entire hour plus long conversation on how insurance has incentivized moving away from wellness and towards just the pillifying of our health and well-being, which doesn't
Hmm.
work. Or at best is just a bunch of band-aids. And so as a result of it, people are walking around, they're getting terrible advice. I met someone who was told they were diabetic, to type 2 diabetes, mostly due to size, to high BMI, and they were told that they should eat less fat and more vegetables. And the vegetables that they were given as examples were corn and potatoes. This is a medical doctor telling someone, now this is a very egregious example, but this is a medical doctor
Hmm.
telling someone, get less fat and protein and more base carbs, and that will help your diabetes. And surprisingly, that person didn't do well with that. And I said to them, didn't they say less carbs and more protein? Oh, no, 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 no. They said less meat, that meat was making me fat and that the fat was making me diabetic. And I said, well, not only is that not true, but carbs are what turn into sugar. And so I had to actually explain it. Of course, they were, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but
Yeah,
they
no, you're
actually
good.
didn't believe me at first because their doctor told them this. So I'm showing them actual videos and I'm like, listen, this isn't me. I'm some conspiracy theorist. First of all, I'm the guy that lost 100 pounds at that point, but also, that's actually not true. Like, here's actually, this isn't like tinfoil hat stuff. You were just flat out told something that wasn't true, but that doctor thought it was true. More importantly, the doctor was saying that the most important thing they could do was, you mentioned metformin, take metformin. And if that doesn't
Hmm.
work, we may have to graduate you to a fast acting insulin,
Yep.
because that's what they know how to do. And, it's a major problem because I think some of it is also that doctors realize that most of us are complacent and it's easier to tell someone, take this twice a day or take this once a week or take this every day, instead of saying you should work out more, you should eat better,
Hmm.
here, you should watch your macros, you should do this and do that. Most people are like, no, just give me a thing to take. So I think that's it too. I think it's a laziness issue, or even maybe not laziness as much as, I think complacency is a better word. I was so busy. I didn't have I didn't have time. Meanwhile,
Hmm.
I didn't have time not to do it, but in my mind, I didn't have time to do it. When you're up to your neck with work and bills and debt and your life stress and worries, that's the first thing that goes on the chopping block, even though that's what makes everything else worse if you don't address that.
Right. So, people look at the way that I eat, and I ate a carnivore diet for about 2 years, and I've since gone off that because I lost 50 pounds and got into great shape.
Right.
Kind of tackling onto what you were saying there, I didn't realize how bad I felt until I realized how good I could actually feel.
Yes.
And that's so important. And to think that a doctor would tell somebody eat more corn and potatoes instead of healthy fats, which could even be some saturated fats, even though people like to vilify those. I think those are perfectly healthy, because they contain a lot of protein, iron, and a lot of necessary nutrients. Upping your protein take would perhaps be one of the most important things that I think anybody in regards to their diet could do, because protein has been proven over and over again in a lot of studies to be the most satiating macronutrient. There's a study
Yep.
done where women who were given protein snacks versus just carbs or fat snacks actually had ate less throughout the day because of the protein content. And
Yep.
protein
Yep.
has the highest thermic effect of food. So if you eat 10 calories of protein, about 3 of those calories are going to be burned off just from digesting it. So,
Yep.
that's a little bit of a tangent on protein, but
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
when it comes to diet, I think protein is perhaps the most important macro of them all. So, doctors should be prescribing a little bit more lifestyle stuff. Like, if you have an excessively high BMI, you're pre-diabetic, diabetic, or whatever, say, hey, well, why don't we just try to get you to maybe walk just 10 minutes a day? You don't have to go crazy, because a
Yep.
lot of
Yep.
people want to diet themselves right off a cliff. They want to go do an hour cardio in the morning. They want to work out 2 times a
Yep.
day. They want to eat, absolutely zero carbs, and just try to lose weight as fast as possible. Well, how long are you going to sustain that? You're not going to be able to sustain that for
Exactly.
very long, because it's not
Yep.
an effective lifestyle change that you can do every day. If you could just walk, maybe try to get a little bit more protein in, and then build your way up to those lifestyle habits, then you'll see long lasting change. And I especially
Exactly.
think after this last year, well, year and a half of being locked in your home and being told that, oh, well, the germ's going to come and kill you, everybody should take their health seriously. And we clearly know there is no argument to be had here that people who are healthier see better outcomes with COVID.
Oh, easily. I want to go back to the protein thing because I feel
Sure.
like you didn't rant long enough about protein. No, no, seriously. I'm
Yeah.
a big so protein is satiating. It
Mhm.
takes, like you said, it takes more just to even process it. It makes you more satiating. It keeps you not hungry for longer. Another
Mhm.
cool thing is if you're eating protein and it's more natural, not just like as a protein a
Yep.
supplement or something, but if you're eating things like meat, legumes, they usually also have a good amount of fat in them, and
Mhm.
fat is also satiating, but it also slows the absorption of glucose.
Yep.
So if you eat it, most people are not going to eat a carnivore diet. They're going to eat a diet
Right.
that's a mixture of protein and fat and carbs. Well, that slows down the absorption of the carbs as well. So whether you're
Mhm.
diabetic, pre-diabetic, or not diabetic at all, that it still is reducing those big spikes and lows
Mhm.
of glucose. Which, by the way, as a side note here to that, when I started eating better, and my diet is a sort of a hybrid between two popular diets for people with MS, the Walls Protocol and Overcoming MS. And it is basically, I took those diets, and whatever this allowed and this didn't allow, I took it off. So it's a very highly restrictive diet. And I also dove into the requirements, like you have to have 6 to 10 cups of vegetables and things like that. And it's more than just the diet; it's a bunch of other things too. But the when I started eating that way, I had been dealing with anxiety and depression pretty
Mhm.
much my whole life. And I still very much have an obsessive personality. For example, I thought I'd dabble in politics a couple of years ago, and now look at me. But the anxiety and depression almost completely melted away when I started eating better and working out more. And really, it was the eating better part first, because when I started doing this, I was dealing with about a relapse every month and a half to 2 months. And I was also dealing with having to take steroid and not, like anabolic steroids where you feel great, but like, IV prednisolone, a gram a day, and feeling basically like I was in menopause in between those things. I felt like garbage. I honestly wasn't working out much at that time. I was
Mhm.
just eating better and the weight was coming off, but I also started feeling better. Even in the midst of this crisis of, rediscovering what it was going to be like living with this really bad chronic illness that at that point was felt like I didn't have much time left. I felt better. I actually was in a better mood then than I was before all of it. And I realized it was because a big part of it was because well, first of all, I was focusing on myself instead of constantly just trying to make money. But I think a big part of it was my body was no longer having to deal with these ebbs and flows, big spikes
Mhm.
of sugar and carbs. And what's funny is every once in a while, someone will make me like a dessert that complies with my diet. And it'll be higher in carbs than I usually eat. So it'll be
Mhm.
like some fudge or something like that. And I'll eat it. And inevitably, I'll feel that kind of like rushing from the sugar that I'm not used to for like an hour or so, but I know it's coming. But I realize that's how it always was. That's how I was always having these
Mhm.
kind of like, and not connecting it to what I was eating. And yes, for COVID, if you're obese, that is has almost as high of a correlation to whether or not you'll end up in the hospital or dead or have a major illness of COVID as age is. In fact, for younger people, it's
Mhm.
actually more so. The difference between being 30 and 40 is far less of a difference than the difference between a good BMI and a overweight or obese BMI. So for younger people, it's crucial. If we're talking about ways to reduce your likelihood of hospitalization, and they talk about things like vaccines and stuff, and that's fine. But there's something you can do that doesn't involve taking a
Mhm.
vaccine, and it's just living a better life. And we already know the side effects of eating better and working out more. Everything's better. That we know those
Mhm.
side effects. The adverse reaction is that you live a better life and look better and feel better and everything else.
Right. And the one thing that's actually not talked about that goes to your point is that actually vaccines are more effective in people who are more healthy. So if you want to go down
Oh
that
yeah.
road, then your antibody response is actually better. And if we're worried about stopping the spread, as we so profess that we are, then
Yes.
you have a lower viral load when you're
Yeah.
healthy because
Yeah.
you don't generate so much of a viral load because you're more healthy. You don't get so
Exactly.
sick, so you're less likely to spread it when you're healthier. And, of course, this has been completely absent from the dialogue. There have been some people that talked about it, but you don't hear from the mainstream media. And I think that in and of itself is a crime.
Absolutely. And here's the other thing. most of the people when they're dying from, or pretty much everyone when they're dying from COVID, or they have a really bad case of COVID, a really, extreme case, it's actually their immune system reacting to the
Hmm.
COVID and the viral load. So part of that is the viral load, but part of it is also your immune system being screwed up. And I say this as someone with MS. When you My immune system now is acting relatively normally because of a combination of an immunomodulator that weakens one part of my immune system and strengthens the other part to offset the weakening of this part, but also the fact that my immune system is working better because I'm eating fermented foods, which means that my gut health is better.
Hmm.
I'm staying away from the types of foods that ruin your gut health. I'm staying away from the types of food that cause spikes in your glucose level, which lead to you being anxious and nervous, and which also cause problems with your immune system when you're constantly high stress and high anxiety. Like all of these things, and yes, BMI is directly related to immune health, not just not getting sick as often, but also how your body responds when you do get sick, not having this,
Hmm.
what is it called, cytokine storm, where
Yeah.
your immune system just goes haywire, attacking everything in your body in order to fight the virus off. This is a perfect example of and I don't think there's anyone out there disputing that it's important that getting healthy will make you do better overall. But in a time when they're talking about mandating whether or not you're able to work based on a vaccine,
Hmm.
because it's so crucial that people are, in the best health possible to be able to not get COVID, or at the very least, if they do get COVID, not end up in the hospital or sick or dead, which that's a understandable concern to have. Why are we not even discussing vitamin D when
Right.
we know that vitamin D levels are directly corollary to whether or not you end up in the hospital or not? Or why are we not talking about BMI? These are things that wouldn't even have to be mandated. If you went out and
Hmm.
told people, hey, why don't you take some time to, work out a little bit more and eat a little bit better and take some vitamin D supplement, or get out in the sun. Well, I guess now it's getting colder, but during the
Hmm.
summer, especially, get out in the sun for 20, 30 minutes a day on and get that natural vitamin D. Why aren't we even discussing that? Forget mandating it or whatever. Why aren't we even just mentioning it? They know it's true, so why not say it?
Right. And have you ever seen how to be outside on a nice day, pissed off or miserable? You never do
Oh,
because
it's
of,
hard.
right. The
Yeah,
vitamin
it's
D
hard.
and the sun and just that environment of being outside does make you feel better. So, and the other thing that actually goes into your outcome with COVID actually can sometimes come down to whether or not you think you will beat it or not. There's been plenty of studies on this as well that if you feel like you're going to beat something, the placebo effect can actually
Oh yeah.
alter the way that you deal with something. Like there's a leptin and ghrelin are two hormones that deal with satiety,
Yep.
and
Yep.
there
Yep.
was
Yep.
a study done. They told one group of people that they had high leptin, and one group had high leptin and one group didn't. Well, the group who didn't, just because they told them they had higher leptin, and I might be mixing these up, but regardless, their leptin
Right.
levels were actually 20% higher because of the placebo effect.
That's incredible. And by the way, leptin and
Yeah.
ghrelin are why you should be carb cycling, but that's a whole other subject.
Right,
Anyway,
right.
I know that's off topic, but yeah,
Yeah.
every time I hear that, I'm like, that's why going only keto actually long term
Mhm.
isn't helpful. Anyway,
Right.
I rant a lot about this stuff, but
Yeah,
I
you're
don't
good.
usually do it in podcasts. So here's my opportunity. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason that they do double blind studies on
Hmm.
drugs before they decide whether or not they're effective or not, right? And by the way, double blind, for those who don't know what that means, it means not only does the patient not know if they're getting the
Hmm.
placebo or the actual drug, the person administering it doesn't know whether they're getting the placebo or the drug. They don't
Yep.
even want them to possibly be doing or saying anything
No margin
that
of error.
tips off nothing. They not only do they not want the patient to flat out know whether they're getting it or not, they don't want the patient to even possibly get some kind of subtle cue from the person who's giving it to them that might make them go, oh, I bet it's the real stuff, or oh, I bet this is just a placebo or whatever.
Hmm.
And I mean, the placebo effect is very, very real, except
Hmm.
with vaccines. Vaccines, there is no placebo effect with specifically the COVID vaccine. Everything else, the placebo effect is real, but not with the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, and I really think that some people underestimate that. You have to kind of believe in yourself that you're going to have to get through things. My mother had cancer 3 times, and God bless her, she survived it all. But I'm sure,
Wow.
you know, she never sat there and bitched and said, "Oh, woe is me." She went to work and she worked her ass off, and she lugged on through, you know. But you know, I
Right.
guarantee you, she wasn't sitting there thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die." And a lot of survivors probably have the same sentiment. You know, every person I've known that's had cancer or some kind of fatal illness, you typically don't hear those people down in the muck. These people are just, they want to keep going because honestly, you know, what's your other option? Lay down and die? That don't sound like a good
That
life to me.
that was where I was. And
Mhm.
obviously there are times where it doesn't matter what your outlook is. It doesn't matter
Right.
how good you feel or whatever. I'm sure Bob Ross, as good of a mood as he was in all the time and as happy as he was, his cancer was so aggressive it was going to kill
Right.
him. And also on the other side, there are people that no matter how negative they are, the illness wasn't that severe to begin with. But
Mhm.
clearly, there is a correlation between your attitude, your mood, how you choose to address it.
Mhm.
Not just saying, "Well, I'm going to beat this," but actually building a plan to try to beat it or try to have the
Right.
best outcome as possible. That's what I did. I mean, when I was faced with this and I was told, we don't know how many years you'll be able to walk, you'll be able to talk, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to, I mean, a longer term MS can affect your cognitive abilities and things like that, and I was having a really bad aggressive case of it. The average person with MS gets, I think, one relapse a year without medical intervention. That's like it's like 0.9 per year or something like that. And I was getting one every like couple of months. And it was scary. And for those who don't know, a relapse is you have an attack, where some kind of neurological attack where some kind of new symptoms emerge, or existing symptoms greatly worsen dramatically. And then over the course of several, usually months or weeks, you find out just how much it slowly kind of gets better over time. But like, for example, for my first relapse, I still have like a sandpapery feeling in this hand, and there are
Mhm.
some times where it's barely there, other times where it's really intense, especially if I've been using my arm or hand a lot that day. I'll feel it a lot more. Every time that was happening, it was a new scar on my brain and spinal cord, but also new manifestation of symptoms and the stress that causes. And I was determined that I was going to be able to live my life as I wanted to, as long as I possibly could. And I also re-geared myself towards, if my entire life, as my entire adulthood and even part of my teenage years have been spent chasing money, and that's no longer a major concern now. I was focused on, I'm going to become a billionaire. And then I thought, but how important is that if you end up a billionaire that can't do anything? Like, what does that even mean? If instead, what if you can live a life where you can now devote your life to service and to keep taking care of yourself, being kind to yourself, being kind to others, and trying to help others and help yourself? What will that look like? And that's what I've done so far. And I am now the happiest I've been here. Well, I'm the healthiest I've been here, and the healthiest I've been, at least in my adult life. I'm more active now than I've ever been in the last time I was this active, I was probably like, 13 or 14 in terms of being able to run around and do stuff, far more so than I was even 10, even 10 years ago.
Right. That's awesome to hear. I'm very, very happy for you that you're doing well and, you know, kicking ass and taking names.
Right.
Shifting to another realm where you kick ass, and this is a slightly more, I don't want to say grim thing, but a, subject I wanted to touch on because I know I only got you for a little bit.
Sure.
Um, we'll kind of blow through these. I had the question of what would you have done in retrospect for 2020? And just before we get into that, all your diet talk, I'm actually very, very excited that we could kind of breeze through that. And I think a lot of other people will be too, because, you know, I'm sure you don't get to talk about that a lot because everyone wants to talk
Yeah.
about stuff like this. So.
Right, right, right. So what you're saying, like, what if had I been in the White House, what would I have done when COVID
Well,
came or
during,
whatever?
I'm sorry, during campaigning, looking back at your campaign throughout 2020, what would you have done differently?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So biggest thing I think I would have done differently, is in the first couple months of the campaign, and because of the way that we do things, we pick our candidates the end of May, which gives
Mhm.
us essentially 5 months to run for office. And So a couple months is a big deal.
Right.
Um, the first couple months when I would do interviews, when I would do appearances and stuff like that, I would try to when I would be asked a question, I would desperately try to parlay it into this greater conversation about libertarian ethic and thought on everything. And I realized that that's not how most people think. Yes, I do want to bring people into libertarianism and have them learn the entire thing, not just what they're concerned about, but that's a longer process than something you can do in an interview.
Yeah.
You know, what's important is focusing on the things that people were talking about and staying focused on it. And once you can bring them in and get more support from them, then you can have that longer conversation long term. And that's sort of what I'm doing now. But I learned coming into the summer, I learned that I needed to, by about middle of the summer, I learned that I really needed to focus on, you know, what people were mostly concerned about, which was the lockdowns, COVID, the possibility of, you know, mandates and things like that in the future, joblessness, pretty much everything that was happening due to the lockdowns, the joblessness, the hopelessness, the higher suicide rates, the higher addiction rates, all of that. And then also things like police brutality, protest, riots, how to deal with that kind of thing. That's what people were talking about. And I found once I was more focused on that, than I would have, that I was getting more attention that was actually like sticking when I started doing that, and you know, kind of engaging people more on the things they were talking about. What else? I can't say I didn't leave everything on the court, because especially in that last month, I was in like 2 states a day. And I was kind of everywhere doing as much as I could and doing interviews in between. So, I mean, I would wake up at, especially that last 2 or 3 months, I'd wake up, you know, 3, 4 in the morning, go to bed midnight, 1 o'clock. And I really didn't have to do working out during that time because I was literally running around and walking around and, you know,
Yeah.
helping set up stuff and everything. I was about as active as I've been. I actually lost weight on the campaign trail.
Wow.
But I think the biggest thing was the messaging discipline was probably something I had to learn a couple months in and retool to that. And unfortunately, the overall campaign theme, and I had little control of the overall campaign communication. I could really only control what I said, was that, you know, talk about an idea and then try to spread it out to the whole libertarian thing. And that's just not, people aren't there. You know, if they ask you about the border crisis, you talk about the border crisis and how to deal with that, or you talk about COVID, or you don't talk about you don't say, well, here is why this is a problem with the way government does things and how libertarians think about it. People don't, it's true what we're saying, but people don't think that way. And it makes it feel like you're changing the subject. Well, we are changing. It makes it feel like you're trying to not talk about that thing, and that you're trying to distract. And even though we're not, that's what it looks like to someone who said, I didn't ask you about all this other philosophical stuff. I asked you about the border crisis or about COVID or about whatever. And you have to really hyper focus on those things.
Right. So it's essentially kind of meeting people where they're at.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
as of like the last 6 months, you know, you've really blown up, and I've seen, you know, you come out on some social media stuff and say like, look, the messaging in the campaign, whenever you felt like it wasn't on point, you said, you know, hey, this might have been my social media team, but this was on me to make sure that this didn't happen. And I have to say, I really, really respect that you came out and said, look, even though this may not have been me personally that said this, I still have to own my whole team, because this is, you know, once again, my platform. And if they're running under my name, then I, you know, just the leadership aspect is something very admirable, and clear that's absent from a lot of leaders today.
It's my name.
Mm-hmm.
It says Spike Cohen. And if I, and I have people that I've picked to help with that. And if they put something out that doesn't line up with what I said, that's my fault for not having the controls in place, because it's literally my name. It would be like if I said, hey, you use my voice box and move my mouth, and then they have me say something, I go, hey, whoa, 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 I didn't mean to say that. Like you have to take ownership of it, right? And so that's what I did. Now I will say, those there were a couple moments that were more egregious than others, but I can count on one hand the number of times that that something was put out in my name that I just vehemently disagree with. And maybe a couple other times that things were put out and said in a way I wouldn't have said it, but that isn't as big of a deal as the times that they just said stuff that I'm like, I don't agree with this. This doesn't, I don't believe any of this. That happened maybe, you know, 2 or 3 times, but that was my fault. I had gone from where I was in total control of my social media, I was the only one doing it, to being so busy that I barely even had time to post, and having a really good team doing it. And there were just some times that there were some misses, but it was in my name. And so we put the controls in place. Everything has to come through me. Everything before it gets posted, I at least have to take a look at it, just briefly to say it. And then we also started doing, once I was more normalized with my travel schedule, we started having times that we'd sit down and figure out what was going to be put out that day. So it was actually me putting it together with a team, as opposed to a team putting it together in my name and me just looking at it and saying, yeah, that looks fine. And now like 99% of what you see is from me. It's all I still have a volunteer team, but at this point, what they're doing is they're just sending me subjects and maybe giving a brief breakdown of what it is. And if I find it interesting, I look more into it and write out my kind of hot take response to it. And that seems to be working pretty well.
Right, and your takes I think are very, very digestible and very, very well written. Every time you have a post on Facebook that kind of goes into detail on something going on, I always think you're spot on, and I think most libertarians would agree that you are spot on. Obviously, you're
Well,
gonna have
thank you.
some crazies either way, of course. So I guess continuing on down this Liberty Road, there's been a divide, perhaps more so even after last year than this year, in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
What is Spike's answer to our seeming divide in the Libertarian Party? Because I think that we're all pretty close together and we agree on probably 99, 95% of stuff.
Yep.
But it seems like people are torn between this messaging versus getting people elected. And in my mind, I think you could have both, but it seems like there's just such a fight about it.
Not only can you have both, you have to have both. There is no such thing as relatable milk toast, and there's no
Mhm.
such thing as unrelatable bold effectiveness. Like you have to be someone people actually want to hear anything from, and you have to present things in a way that actually connects with them. But you also have to give them a clear alternative, especially when your likelihood of winning is lower than your opponents. If you go in and say, those Republicans and Democrats, we're the best part of both. We're kind of like them, except it's marginally better. And we certainly wouldn't say anything that offends you. People might like us more. We might get really high ratings in terms of which party do I like the best. But then they look at us and they're like, all right, well, if you're 20% better and your likelihood of winning is, a 15th of what this party or this party are, and I still think this one's the lesser evil or this one's the lesser evil, 99 times out of 100 they're going to pull that lever for the lesser evil, or certainly 9 times out of 10. So yes, that's a false dichotomy that's been in this party for way too long.
Mhm.
So yes, we agree probably at least 90% of the time, and that 10% or less of things we disagree on are important things. I'm not discounting it, but that's not the real problem. The problem is twofold. The first problem is that we are looking to do this the wrong way. And the second problem is no one's really provided a good blueprint on how to do what we even want to do. So the Libertarian Party is a committee that is set up to comply with Federal Election Commission laws. That's it. Now, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have, because we can't run candidates for office at the federal or state or local level if we don't have that apparatus in place at the federal and state and local level to run candidates. Thanks to Republicans and Democrats passing these ballot
Mhm.
access laws. By the way, that's the reason why we're often we're the only of the three options. There is no fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth option, is because we're one of the few people that actually has all of that in place to be the third party on there, to be another party that's on there. But we keep waiting for this committee that was set up to comply with federal law and these smaller committees that were set up to comply with state law to lead us to victory. And the reality is, that's not what they were set up to do. This constant factionalism of, is this caucus in charge? Is this caucus in charge? Is this type of messaging in charge of the party? Is this type of messaging in charge of the party? It's kind of like a fight. It's sort of like Lord of the Rings, the epic battles in Lord of the Rings over the Ring of Power and who wielded it. Except imagine if the fights are like pillow fights with people that are wearing helmets, and the ring that they're fighting over is made out of used Pillsbury toaster strudel wrappers, and it doesn't it doesn't have any actual power. Everyone just wants to look at it and say they have it. It's like possums fighting over a dumpster. Like it's
Mhm.
terrible, because they're so focused on who's in control. They're not even looking back and saying, this isn't the vehicle to do what we want to do, which is spark a cultural revolution that leads to people getting elected. This is just the apparatus we use to run people for office, number one. And then number two, we don't actually set a blueprint for how to do that. And that's why I'm going to be launching very soon, later this month. I'm going to be launching an organization that does exactly that. And I'm going to give you a very brief preview on it that I've just started doing in the last week or so. Basically, we're going to address all of that. We're going to address the fact that there is not that we're focusing way too much on the electoral political end and on using a political party to do it, and not on changing things at the community level, getting people bought into the ideas of liberty by showing them how it works better. And then we're also going to deal with the fact that no one's actually set a blueprint by setting the blueprint. And the blueprint is you. The blueprint is you becoming a member of this organization, having access to the resources and the tools and the directories of coalition groups you can build at your disposal, and then giving you the tools to work together to actually be and I hate to say be the change, but be the leader in your community. Be the people in your community who look at the problems that your city, your town, your neighborhood, your state, your country is facing, and provide a viable alternative, and then give legislative goals to your city councils, county councils, state legislatures for them to actually pass. And if they do pass it, use that to push for your candidates to get in to do even more. And if they don't pass it, use that to push for your candidates to come in so that it'll actually get passed. And again, there's going to be way more details on this, but we're basically, when I got into this movement, I did so as someone who has been building and correcting and growing organizations for over 20 years now. And I was somewhat removed. I've been a libertarian for many years, but I was removed from the party culture. And when I got in, I didn't have the passionate and emotional ties to the different factions and groups. And so I looked in and I saw what the problems were from sort of a dispassionate, almost uninterested point. And I saw the glaring organizational structural issues that were in place. And the biggest one that keeps becoming more glaring is we're looking to the wrong people, the wrong organization to do it in the first place. No one is using the Republican Party or the Democrat Party to affect the culture. They're using them to run candidates after they've already used media and entertainment and community involvement to change the culture their way. And we have to do the same thing. That the LP needs to become where we put candidates. It need not be the LP. It needs to be the liberty movement. And that's what we're going to be building.
That's awesome, and I'm very, very glad to hear that. One of the main reasons why I started this podcast is because I wanted to spread the message of liberty and health. I feel it's very important that we're not just people going in the corner because of the state. We need to be a movement of actual people who do other things other than just read Rothbard in our houses and scream because the government's violating our rights. So, I'm a musician. I'm an exercise enthusiast. I'm now a podcast host. I hope to be a father one day. I hope to be a business owner. These things are important, and it shows that we're not just, Republicans who like to smoke weed or, Democrats who like guns, or, whatever you want to say. I know you're tight on time, so we only got a few minutes. There's kind of 3 questions I wanted to run past you.
Okay.
And these are going to be kind of what you would do. So how would you appeal to boomer cons? Essentially people who are saying China's going to take over the world, and the election was stolen off of Donald J. Trump, and Donald J. Trump, if he was just in the White House, we wouldn't have these lockdowns, we wouldn't have these mandates, we'd be flying down a golden road with golden toilets in our bathrooms. How do you appeal to those people to bring them over more towards our side?
So first of all, statistically, the older someone is, the more set in their ways they are. And it's both because of just a tremendous amount of experience they've had, which leads them to think that, they know better than someone telling them something new. But also there's actual neurological changes that happen as you get older, compared to when you're younger and your brain's still developing and you're still developing your ideas. So just the older someone is, and again, this is statistically, you can find incredibly open-minded old people and very rigid young people, but just overall, old people are typically, the older someone is, the less likely they are to change ideas. What I do with boomer cons in specific, the FUDs of the community, what I typically do is, if someone's talking to me from a standpoint of I'm a conservative, well, I know that their concerns, or at least their perceived concerns, are government interference, telling them how to live their life, not others. They're okay with them telling others how to live their life. And that's a big part of the problem, is that we have a hard disconnect there. But how they live their life, And they are tied to very vague, often vague ideas of limited government and small taxes and returning to the way things were when things were great, which they typically were not. But they have these ideas. Rather than try to disabuse them of these ideas, I just talk to them from their standpoint. I say something like, if they're talking about, Trump was great with the lockdowns, I say the lockdowns happened under Trump. And he said they were bad. That's great that he said they were bad, but he still fully funded those states with infrastructural spending, security spending, counterterrorism spending, all of that stuff. Not once did he threaten to cut it off. And in fact, he actually gave the governor of Georgia, Kemp, a hard time when he didn't do lockdowns. He actually gave him a hard time over that because he
and
hated Kemp. But and what?
And he knocked Sweden for not locking down.
Yeah, and he knocked Sweden for not locking down too. More importantly, it was his CDC that was laying down the groundwork. The Trump administration CDC was laying down the groundwork, these scientific guidelines for when states should or should not implement lockdowns, and how they should do them, and to what extent, and what markers they should be using when they choose to do different lockdown implementations and so forth. All of that was created or implemented by the Trump administration. And he kept saying on Twitter how bad it was, and at his campaign rallies, he kept saying how bad it was. He did nothing to actually stop it. And I say the same thing about gun control. Who's the guy who said take the guns first, due process later? Who's the one who pushed for red flag laws? Who's the one who pushed for a hearing aid, suppressor bans and bump stock bans, which are, those like a gimmick.
It's a virtue signal.
Who did this? Donald Trump did it. So I don't try to say Donald Trump, is a bad person because he wants to tell other people how to live their life. They're like, good. I don't like how they're living their life. And you can't get there with them until you recognize that he was also crapping all over you and laughing in your face about it. So my thing with boomer cons is I appeal more to their sense of indignation by saying, you got lied to by the Republicans too. And that's I've found, and again, it's not going to work with everyone, but it certainly gets them to at least go, well, yeah, but they're better than the Democrats. Are they? They got your vote and then did the same thing. But let's say they're better than the Democrats. Is that enough for you? Is being marginally better than Kamala Harris good for you? Is that you're willing? That's what you talk about. You're going to limit government. You're going to make a better future for our kids. Are we going to make America great again by being marginally better than Kamala Harris? That's how I do it.
Whew. Yeah. One quick question.
I know you had two more. We can go ahead and do those.
Okay, cool. How would you appeal to people who are hot on vaccine mandates and think that we need to do vaccine mandates? That'll be my last question. I got one short one after this that you can answer in probably 2 seconds. So how do you appeal to people who are crazy about the vaccine mandates?
Well, first of all, what I don't typically do, unless I can have a longer conversation with them, is talk to them about the effectiveness of the vaccine, because many of them are just utterly convinced that if you get the vaccine, you're just not going to get COVID and you're not going to get sick. And, all the examples to the contrary are outliers. And if you try to talk to them about how it's like a personal choice, if you can still get it and spread it, that doesn't change, but it's just a matter of whether or not you end up in the hospital or not, or end up sick or not. That you need that makes it a personal choice for yourself. They either don't believe that, or they go, yeah, but you're getting sick, makes you put strains on the hospital system, which if you wanted to have, I reserve this for longer conversations. Okay, so where's your indignation for obese people and people who smoke and people who drink? Because they're way more likely to end up in the hospital than someone who's unvaccinated. But I don't typically do that in short burst conversations. Instead, I focus on the fact that the countries that have had the highest rates of vaccination are the ones who were the most open right off the bat with expectations about the vaccine. Long before Scandinavian countries and Israel started introducing, any kind of mandates to try to, bring in those handful of people that didn't get vaccinated, which, by the way, didn't typically work. The way that they got the higher rates of vaccination was that they were completely open and honest with what they were talking about. They didn't say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. They didn't say we're losing our patience with you. They didn't say we're going to destroy your life if you don't get vaccinated. They said if you take this vaccine, you are exponentially less likely to end up in the hospital or dead. And there's also at least an increased likelihood that you won't get it. That's it. And it's free. That's what they told them. And that was enough to get vaccination rates around 70%. And I would argue that if that is what they had said from day one and ensured people, we're not going to make you do this. here is what it does and what it doesn't do. There's a possibility it at least reduces your chances of getting or spreading it. And yes, there is a possibility that you may have to get boosters in the future, because that was the other thing they lied about. Oh, you just take it once, you get your double dose or your one dose of Johnson and Johnson, and then you just you get it and that's it, and that's the end of it. And then you can take your mask off. Oh, actually, you got to put your mask back on. Actually, you got to keep getting vaccine every few months. Oh, also, we're going to take your job if you don't do it. They are if they wanted to create division and political division and resistance to something that is actually probably a good idea for most people, if they wanted to do it, they couldn't have engineered it better. That's what I focus on, is let's try to, if the goal is to get as many people who should get vaccinated as possible, they did it in the worst way possible.
Right. I said on the second podcast with Adam Nutter that only a government could really fuck up the vaccines as much as they have.
They're
And
free. They're
yeah,
literally giving them out. They're literally giving them out. In some cases, some states are giving you money and lottery tickets if you
and
get
donuts.
it. And donuts and Chick-fil-A. They're giving, like, here's all the stuff in the world. And enough people are like, you've been so shady about this from the beginning. I don't want to take it. Like, and yeah, I guess I'll lose my job. I'm not taking it. I don't like how you're acting. If they had just been upfront from the beginning, I guarantee you we'd be over 70% now. Not that that would stop the spread of COVID, because that's the other thing. And I don't do this with people that want high vaccination, but we need to start having the conversation. This is not a pandemic. It's an endemic. It is not going away. The COVID waves are just as part of our new normal as cold and flu season are. It's not going away anytime soon until we have like gene therapies and stuff like that, which probably are a few years away. But in the meantime, it's not going away. It's not going away. Disease is not going away. And we have to decide, how do we want to live our lives for the rest of our lives? And I think most people who are just going along with this stuff until COVID's over, when they recognize that's not a thing, we're going to have more people on our side saying, no, I don't think people should have to get endless boosters to be able to keep their job or to be able to go into a restaurant or a gym. And no, I don't think we should have to wear masks for the rest of our lives. No, I don't think we should play red light, green light with the economy and cause all these massive distortions to the supply chain and everything else, because it's not going anywhere. I think we'd get more people on our side with that. And I know you have one more question.
Yeah. Just to kind of tag on to the end of that, I think what you get after two presidents pushing the vaccine as hard as they did and trying to rush it out as quick as possible is just a mildly effective vaccine that kind of helps in some people and may not help in others. But you hear these conspiracies that, you take the vaccine, it's birth control, it's population control, it's whatever, it's going to kill everybody. It's just, it's not that, it ain't that grand. It's just government incompetence. So I guess my last question before you get out of here, when are you coming back to Pittsburgh?
Oh man, I haven't actually campaigned in Pittsburgh. I've been near it, but I haven't done it yet. I want to come to Pittsburgh. The short answer is, you know how to reach me. You know how to get in touch with my booking people. Try to set an event up. Every time I'm going to these different things, while we're still waiting to create the or while we're still finishing up creating the organization, all these things I'm going to are state and local affiliates and other groups like Concerned Veterans for America, a group down in Florida called Women's Voices of Southwest Florida. They're reaching out to me and saying, hey, we're making this event or we're having you do this thing. Can you come out and do it? If you guys, if you're in Westmoreland County.
Yes.
If Westmoreland County LP and or the Pennsylvania Libertarian Party and or any of the other local affiliates want to put something impactful together, pitch it to my booking team. I'll come out. We'll book a time. You do have to book me a few months out.
Oh,
but
course,
I'd be happy to come out. I actually haven't. I want to do something in Pittsburgh. I want to do something in Philly too. I haven't, the two biggest cities in Pennsylvania. I haven't done anything there, so I'd be happy to.
Okay, awesome. Well, there is a barbecue restaurant in Monroeville. They do not have smoked salmon. I will apologize.
Okay.
They do have the best brisket and the best ribs you'll ever have in your entire life. And I've been all over this side of the country, up and down, Kentucky, you name it. Just have not seen better barbecue. So if you're in Pittsburgh and you're around, I'll hook you up. So I kept you a little bit long.
So unfortunately, I'm on a pescatarian diet, but if you bring my wife too, she can enjoy the brisket and ribs and tell me how it is. But no, I would love, I guarantee you there are so many great fishmongers and delis that have smoked salmon in Pittsburgh. You don't have to sell me on going to Pittsburgh. I'd be happy to go to Pittsburgh.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I think I'll have to talk to my local affiliate and some of the other ones and see if we can get something set up, because I'm sure they would all love to have an event where you came and spoke, and especially with this new initiative you got going on. That'd be awesome. So I kept you a little bit longer than you would have wanted, so I'll apologize for that. I greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast,
Absolutely, man.
Spike. Go
I'm
ahead, plug
happy
your
to do it.
stuff, and we'll rock and roll.
I'm Spike Cohen on all social media: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on TikTok for the kids. SpikeCohen.com is where you can see my newest media appearances. You can also see my events. All my upcoming events are listed out there on SpikeCohen.com. I have a podcast called, I actually have two podcasts, The Muddy Waters of Freedom and My Fellow Americans. They're live on Tuesday and Wednesday nights on all social media platforms. There's also a podcast version on all podcast platforms. That's on Muddied Waters Media. You can find that on all social media and podcasting platforms, or on muddiedwatersmedia.com. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk, Kyle. Thanks for having me on, man.
Of course, and thank you, Spike. So, in liberty and health, everybody, with Spike Cohen, thanks everybody for tuning in, and until next time, take care.